So on the show, we've talked a lot about the employee journey. The first thing that comes to my mind are those key moments that matter that every employee experiences. So what was the hiring experience like? How did my onboarding go? How were my work anniversaries and key accomplishments celebrated?
Yeah, I think about my best work experiences and one that comes to mind is my last experience and they had all of this stuff mapped out to the T. At the time I didn't know that, but in hindsight they had their stuff figured out.
It's interesting. The old school approach would have been to look at the employee life cycle or the hired or fire process, but that is just outdated. And I think most HR people today would agree that the employee journey, it isn't linear. You've got to look at it more broadly. More of an employee journey map would be a more effective way to approach it.
I think you're right. But for the people leaders out there, they're like, what is an employee journey map? Like, how do I even go about creating it? What would you say to them?
That first, I would say that's a great question. In the past, like that would have been a major initiative, like an annual goal for the HR team. But our friends at Penn have created an employee journey designer tool and a ton of resources to support it that will allow you to do this in like 5 simple steps.
Yeah, I mean, I've taken a look and I am super impressed with what they've built. It's customizable. You log in and there's a pre-built library of content that's waiting for you there so that you can easily
Yes.
start crafting your unique employee journey. And did we mention that it's free? I don't think I mentioned that,
Heck
right?
yeah, we love free.
Yeah, and as of now, it's not even officially launched. So only MPL listeners are getting early access to it. So if you want to try the employee journey designer, you have to follow these two simple steps. One, grab your computer and go to pinhq.com/MPL. That's pynhq.com/MPL. From there, sign up with your work email and you're good to go. We are huge fans of Penn and we really believe in their product. So please go check it out right now. You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast. Today's episode will be a part of our People Leader series, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at and what they really do every day. Our guest today is Pat Wadors, Chief People Officer at UKG. Pat, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Before we jumped on the call, I was reflecting back to the early days of the Modern People Leader, and I think the very first guest that we had on was Debbie Shotwell, who I think she's still at Stack Overflow. But we ask every guest, who do we need to bring onto the show next? And you were the first name that came to mind. That was almost, I guess, 3 years ago. So to actually have you here with us today, it feels like we made it moment
Yes.
for the Modern People Leader. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Sorry it took so long.
I it only took 3 years. So we like to start every episode with good news stories. So we all share a personal or work related story from the past week or two, and could be anything. Just a way to kick off the episode with some gratitude and some positivity. And we like to let our guests go first. So if you have something, jump in. If not, we always have something.
I'm grateful I'm going to be grandma times two. So I
Oh, let's
had
go.
a grandbaby girl about 15 months ago, and a grandson is coming in March. And I can't
Wow.
wait. And it's my 30th wedding anniversary year. So I've got a lot to be grateful for.
What is 30? Is there like a silver or gold or diamond? Like I forget. There's like
I don't
I
know.
think it's the Brits. Okay. Well,
I have to find out. Darn it. I should have been playing this up more. Like I should be grateful I hit 30. I'm like, look at us.
What
you're
are
like, we made it. That's the gift right
We
there.
made it.
what are the grandkids' names?
Everly Faith Waters.
Okay.
So the Everly brothers. And they're still debating and arguing on the boy. So
Uh,
that's to be determined.
are there any contenders?
Um, I don't think so. I think they went over like David. My husband's name's David, but her brother's name's David. And so not another
Mm,
David, too
a
many
lot of Davids in
Davids.
the family.
Yeah, and then if you choose one grandpa versus the other grandpa, like how do you do that? So I'm just stepping back like a good grandma and just say, well, you do you and let me know when I get to hold the baby.
There you go. That's what my mom
Smart
does.
move.
She's learned to just stay out of it.
Yeah, just stay.
Um, yeah. Steven, do you want to go next or you want me to take it?
Sure. No, I'll go next. So I'm going to go personal this week. My good news is that if I talk about it a lot on the show, I co-parent two daughters. They're 11 and 13, and those are interesting ages. Those are like transitional ages. There's a lot going on in life, in their personalities and their learning. And I typically have, since I co-parent, I typically have them Thursdays and every other weekend. That's just the arrangement we have. And so this week I have the girls for extra days, and it's just awesome to observe their routine on a random Tuesday or Wednesday. I don't ever get to see that. It's always like Thursdays are always so rushed. So to have a little more space and to ask more questions, to hear stories about what's going on. Middle school is just so awkward and difficult. And so
Yes.
I being able to hear all about it is my good news this week.
Weren't you telling me that awkward is the most commonly used word in your house?
Without a doubt. If you ask my daughters about like how a situation was or a person or a teacher, everything is just so awkward. But and this was like a COVID phenomenon for us, like at post-COVID school, super awkward. So
That's hilarious. I have two good news stories. I have one that's work related and one that's personal. So on the work side, we are gearing up for HR Tech next week. This will be my first HR Tech. This year, we've been to Transform, we've been to Unleash. But from what Steven has shared, this is like on another level in terms of scale. So I'm a bit like nervous, but also excited. I think it'll be cool to connect with hopefully some past guests to learn and maybe we'll connect with some listeners. So that's my work related good news story. On the personal side, and this is actually probably more important for me, but I'm a huge Texas Longhorns football fan, and that's where I went to school. And this weekend is their big rivalry game. So we play OU, and that's happening in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl. Yeah, I'm making the quick trip up to Dallas this weekend, and I'm hoping that we win, hoping we don't get embarrassed.
Fingers crossed.
Yep, yep. So Pat, you have maybe one of the most impressive resumes that I've seen. You've worked at some amazing companies from Yahoo to LinkedIn to ServiceNow to Procore to now UKG. I feel like you've been at some amazing places, but I'm sure like you've probably had quite the journey. So give us like the Pat story, like I guess as quickly as you can in 5 to 10 minutes. But what's your story?
Um, Probably I'll try to make it very quick. So in school, I sucked at school. I was a CD student in elementary, middle school when it was awkward, and in high school, continue to be awkward. I got my confidence by playing sports and doing art. So I've been an artist since I was 7, 8 years old. And my mom had 8 kids and the baby out of 8. And so they didn't understand why I was struggling so much. My brother is an Irish twin. He made straight A's. And I knew I could out manipulate him in some ways. I'm like, I don't know. I can't do well in school. So freshman year in college, I went to Career Center to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, and is school even worth my time? And wasn't sure how I was going to fit into what is normative, right, for a career path. And I found out I liked social work, teaching, and this thing called HR. And the counselor also identified me as being dyslexic for the first time in my life. So I was a freshman. My mom had just passed. Like, it was like, wow. And I'm like, she asked me, like, how do you deal with your disability? And I'm like, I was looking at my hands and my feet going, I don't know what you're talking about. And she said, you have a processing disorder. Look at what you're writing down, because you have to write a bunch of stuff down. And she was like, you transpose your letters and blah, blah, blah. And she highlighted them. And also I could see everything. And I'm like, yeah, stop with the red pen. I grew up with a red pen, like misspell, math wrong. And she told me that your IQ doesn't get impacted by dyslexia. It actually makes you more creative. And with the advent of computers and spell check and all that, like, this is a non-issue for you in your life, and you should embrace what makes you unique. So I ran home super stoked. And I told my dad, I want to explore HR. He's in HR, his twin brother's in HR. And I interviewed my uncle, and he said that 80% of a company's operational expense is the cost of talent. So if you think about why this craft exists, is because we've got the largest remit responsibility in any organization. So, and that number holds true today, by the way. Now, if you are consulting focused, it's 100% cost of talent. If you're capital intense, like GM or whatever, it's like 25% cost of talent, but still you need the talent to make your machine work, meaning your company be successful. So at that point in time, I knew I wanted to run HR, like all the bells and whistles. I want to know how to recruit. I want to know how to pay you and your benefits so you feel cared for. And I want to develop you and your training and your, all that cool stuff to hire great, to develop you, to make you net better off. And then when you go off to your next journey, you will look back on that experience and go, wow, that was the best of my career. So I wanted to unlock that 80%. And that's kind of what I've been pursuing all my career.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's not often that you're that early on in your life and you make a decision that you want to go into HR. It's interesting that both your dad and his twin brother were both in HR. Why didn't you interview your dad? You were like, nah, I don't care what he has to say.
He's your dad. I did interview him, but he worked for GM and he was in the middle of negotiating with the UAW. So you've seen the strikes that we have going on, and that's like an intense time. And I asked him about what do you do and how do you navigate it? And he kind of went through the labor negotiations and the cost of talent from that end and manufacturing. And it didn't sound as creative or free to make a difference in how the company gets run and competes in the marketplace. And so I'm like, oh, interesting, but not sexy. Then I found out it could be really sexy of an opportunity. And my first mentor was my uncle, with my dad's blessing, by the way. He was like, yeah, Uncle Ronald can be your mentor. So he taught me how to learn my craft. So if you think about any great craft, you have to spend time doing it. And so he taught me every 3 years, you have to move on to the next part of your craft, because after that, you get pigeonholed into just being seen as an analyst or just being seen as a recruiter. If you want to run the whole thing, 1 year, you're flirting with the gig. Year 2, you're fixing your initial mistakes and getting comfortable. Year 3, kind of getting towards mastery. Year 4, you're definitely in your swing and can anticipate. And so my first 10 to 12 years was learning the craft of HR. And then the next decade was about managing and understanding influence and care and operational rigor around an enterprise view. And then I wanted to be a great leader for all. And so I'm still on that journey.
What an amazing experience to be able to have a family member who's a mentor. Just and I have no idea, other than what you just shared, what that experience was like for you. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that. But for Daniel and I, we're co-hosts. We're also co-founders, and this is Daniel's company, and I've been the CEO of another company. And so we have those conversations often, those like mentoring conversations. And it's just it's not always easy, right? Because you're family, and that brings a different element, but it really is an amazing experience. It has been for me, at least. So interesting to hear
Not
that's
for me.
Also part of your story.
No, I'm just kidding.
I love getting coached and mentoring. Like I try to take my blinders off on how I show up pretty regularly. But my uncle was a trip, because he was very clear. When he first chatted with me, he didn't see women as head of HR. So he kept on saying, do you just want to be a recruiter? Do you want to be benefits administrator? And I'm like, no, Uncle Roland, I'm going to run HR. Now that means I'm doing better than him and my dad. Like, think back at your 19-year-old self going, your job's even too small for me. Like, over the top. Like now in hindsight, I'm like, dang, girl, you're a little obnoxious. But to me, it was like he opened up a world of opportunity. And I'm like, I want to go for the brass ring. So he made that path hard. And he made it hard in a way that I think was amazingly good for me, because I like a challenge. He said, don't play around with this craft unless you really want to do good and do it right. And so don't be spoiled, don't be entitled, pay your dues, so to speak. He also made me get over my fear of being dyslexic in some ways. At the beginning part of my career, he told me to hide my disability. So think one of my stints was comp analyst at Viacom. Remember MTV before the commercials when it was really hip? That's when I worked for MTV and Nickelodeon, Viacom. It was a really cool gig. And so he told me, like, if you want to run HR, you got to learn compensation. And so I'm like, okay. And so I interview and I get the gig and I have a panic attack as I'm coming down 1515 Broadway elevator bank going, holy crap, I'm going to do numbers all day, every day. I'm going to suck. I'm going to fail. I got to quit. I can't take this job. I can't even start this job. Call up my uncle, tell him what a mistake. I cannot do comp. I don't know why you made me do this. This is a bad mistake. And he was like, be quiet. And I'm like, okay, why? And he was like, just take a deep breath. And goes, you're going to make your best friend a financial analyst. Don't tell anyone that you feel weak in this muscle, build the muscle. Your job is to audit your own work, learn how to protect your work, learn how to ask for help. This is your learning. They don't need to know you have a disability. It's not their business. You need to figure out how to navigate. And I'm like, okay. And so I did it. I did it for 3 years. And he's right. It gave me so much confidence to face that so early in my career. And now I'm like shameless about who I am and how I show up. But it was pretty amazing. He was tough and he was wise.
Well, shout out to your uncle. What's your uncle's name?
Roland Williams.
Shout out to Roland. Well, I want to talk about UKG. We won't spend too much time here, but can you quickly describe what you guys do? Like if you had to describe UKG to a family member, and I guess in your case, this would be very easy working at a family of HR professionals, but maybe that distant cousin and and they're asking what UKG does. Like what's the quick explanation?
I ask anyone if they ask me, I'm like, do you have a job? And they go, yeah. Do you get paid? Yeah. Do you know your compensation plan? Did you have to get hired? Did you have to get onboarded? Do you have a problem with your benefits? Yeah. We got it. I go, my team does all of that. That's what I do. I care for you every day. So that's what UKG does. There's system software technology that allows us to hire talent, to pay you, to look at the dashboard, make sure we're doing it fairly and equitably. We do the track your training and making sure you're doing things that you are required to do, and performance management and giving you feedback. And so you think about the employee life cycle, that's what we do. I'm like, oh.
It's a great explanation. So why should me and Steven be jealous that you get to work at UKG?
Because I have a great team to work with. We laugh every day, we solve problems every day, and we care for employees. We make them better for having worked with us. I think that's a good purpose.
That's a great purpose. And I see the pillow in the background. The tagline for UKG is our purpose is people. Yeah, I love that. And so I am so thrilled that I get to lead the next section of our conversation. In off the record conversations with HR leaders, we just kept hearing like differing points of view and how it's kind of a complicated, confusing time. And we call it the state of HR. And so for you, I'm particularly excited about this because you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of different industries. You've seen a lot of different eras of the HR profession. And so let's just start with like, where are we at? Like, what is the state of the union for HR today, in your view?
I think we're getting way more in tune with business acumen. Like, why does, say, for in the SaaS world, the rule of 40 matters? Like the profitability, like how do you create an enterprise landscape of running a business, and what's your talent strategy within that space? How do you attract, retain, develop, and remain profitable so you can reinvest where you need to? And so HR is being really thoughtful about that. I think we're leveraging tech better. I think AI, learning about machine learning and how technology can give nudges for the employee and for management to make us better. I think leaning in on the manager, we've realized in the last 3 years, oh my gosh, the pressure on the manager. Think about COVID, think about social unrest, think about the marketplace. There's so much out there that gets brought into the workplace that we have to teach and support our managers in a different way. And I worry about that. What scaffolding am I giving the leaders so they can show up their best way for their employees? Because they're a multiplier. And if you have a terrible manager, they bruise their employees, that you lose confidence, you lose joy, you bring it home. We have more impact on our mental health as a manager than our primary doctor does. So our partner in life, our spouse, has the same kind of mental health impact as our boss. So if you have a bad manager, we got to fix that. And so I think the state of HR is looking at care, being a great leader for all, being inclusive, making sure our policies and practices are available, and leveraging tech to do that at a global way, in a healthy way.
I'm glad you brought up inclusive. We have a mutual friend I mentioned right before we started the podcast, and Rosanna Dorothy. Shout out to Rosanna. She is just an amazing human being. She's also the VP of Global Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at LinkedIn. And the first time I was introduced to your work was through Rosanna. And I know you were one of the OG proponents of the B in DIBs. And so as an extension to my last question, what do you think the state of the union on belonging in the workplace is? How are we doing? And let's go back to COVID, because the last 30 years have been quite the journey in diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So if we just look at the period going back to COVID to where we are today, let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what are your views? Are you pleased with where we are? Do you also view the work that we have done in the space the last 5 years, let's call it, as being the most unstable it's been and in the last few years? Like, what are your views?
So I've given this a ton of thought. So when I was asked to speak about diversity and inclusion while at LinkedIn, when I was the head of HR there, I was going to do a panel. And for me as an introvert, a panel is super easy to have conversation. But then they kind of twisted me a little bit and said, can you do like a TED-like talk in the front about diversity? And I'm like, and I'm like, why? Like, we're at a diversity event. We don't need to talk about it. They don't know where they are. It's like, take that exit. Like, if this is not the plane you want to be on, go somewhere else. And the moderator is like, Pat, I just want you to talk about how you feel about D&I as a talent leader. And that just, Stephen, that changed my whole framing in my brain. And that night is when I discerned in my own thinking that D&I was necessary, but not sufficient, that if I didn't feel like I belonged and I felt safe and valued, you wouldn't get the best out of me, and I wouldn't feel my best. And so that put me on the path of belonging. And then my boss at the time, Jeff Weiner, the CEO, was like really into acronyms. Everything was a 3-letter acronym. So I'm driving to work and I'm thinking about this. I'm like, diversity, inclusion, belonging, DIBs. I can call dibs on belonging. I love it. And so I started learning about uncertainty and certainty. I started learning about social economics and how you think through things and how you drive behavior change. And what I learned is that real movement in the world happens when you've engaged the brain and the heart. That's when you really improve the world, the brain and the heart. And we were not in sync in this space. We had the brain, we didn't have the heart in all places in the right ways. And I think belonging put the heart into the D&I space. I think that we are getting smarter, especially in the last 3 years, and we're leveraging the storytelling. Human stories from beginning, middle, and end releases chemicals in our brains that makes me unequivocally more attached to you than I was pre-story. So Stephen, if you tell me about where you didn't belong and you did belong, and here's how it made you feel, or what you need, and your friends, your family, and your daughters, like, I'm going to be attached to you now. Like, I'm going to have that story of your daughters in my brain. And when we meet again, I'm going to talk about my kids, or what, I mean, like, I have a base of a relationship that I didn't have before. So if you just look out in the world, belonging is now proliferated in D&I space. Like, they're pulling it in, the sense of belonging, the storytelling, and the storytelling is educational. But what taught us a lot in the last 3 years is that we have to be agile. We have to stay more curious. It can be exhausting if you're alone on this path. And for me, I learned, for example, in the pandemic era, when I was at ServiceNow, I thought I was that in a bag of chips. I was taking care of the mental health. I was giving everyone, use my EAP. There's some therapists we can use if you need help, someone to talk to. Like, I was really trying to lean into my employees. And I have a rule of thumb: if you think of something twice, you got to raise it to me. Like, I assume I don't know, right? If something feels wrong, just raise it. And if I'm right, I'll tell you why I think it stays the same. If I'm wrong, I'll fix it. So thankfully, a few folks even came to me and said, Pat, with all your care, we still don't feel cared for. I'm like, what do you mean? It was my ecosystem that wasn't as diverse and as receptive to different experiences in the world. So people of color could not find a therapist at all. I mean, they just couldn't find help. And so talking to someone that's not been in their shoes was extremely hard and unnerving. You think about different cultures, you think about people moving to take care of their family, how they define family. That was my learning. So I had to change my supply chain. I had to put pressure on my healthcare and all my EAP programs. I had to push the envelope. I'm doing it here at UKG and with my peers, saying, let's define family differently. If we have a program that allows us to do perks or extra tutoring for kids or whatever, can it be anyone that lives in my household with a cap? Can I, if my auntie and my uncle live with me, or if I give, can I support my community, my family, the way I define it, not the way you define it in mainstream US America. So I think it's changing me and it's changing how we show up. I mean, this is a topic that's, I can go on, so I'll stop.
No. I love it. And so for those organizations that seem to be unwinding or maybe just de-investing in this aspect of their people function, like, what are your words of caution for those organizations?
I get it in some ways. Here's where your miss is. Put it in the bloody system. Put it in the ecosystem of what you in the tools, in the methodology, in the training, in the development. It's in the DNA. It's how you hire. It's how you interview. It's how you give feedback. It's how you audit. It's how you care. It's how you look at your supply chain. It should be in every moment that matters. It should be embedded. So it shouldn't be this thing on the side. Like, gosh, I'd love it if my role wasn't needed in org. Can you imagine if every leader knew how to do HR and care and do pay and do performance management and just had this amazing system in the background? That would be awesome, right? Build everything so you're redundant would be ideal, right? Get great inclusive leaders for all that want to lean in, understand diversity makes us smarter. It's great for business. Like do the whole 360-ish view of this, and you'll realize if you pull back, you pulled back on your business strategy and business outcomes. I just think it's short-sighted.
I do too. And one of the things that really caught me when I saw your initial work on belonging was I think adding the I was really, really important because it broadened the conversation. And I think it invited a huge group of people that weren't engaging in the conversation. The I brought those in. And with the B, with belonging, I think it feels like that widened the group. It enrolled even others that had maybe struggled with diversity and inclusion initiatives or the concept, because I think belonging is something that we can all get behind. And especially in a time like today, where we're hearing mixed messages from our leadership team, we can clearly see in these little digital Zoom boxes that our managers are struggling. It's needed now more than ever, this concept of belonging and diversity and inclusion, all of it, DIBs. And so I love your comment that it's extremely short-sighted and the business impact is real. So thank you for sharing that. So just to wrap up this segment, what are some of the things that are keeping you up at night as a people leader today?
Putting the scaffolding around managers and leaders so they could be leaders for all. Like they understand the value and the importance of being transparent, providing context, being agile. I mean, I'm done with only talking about transformational leaders. Like the agility of leading in the moment, of being human in the moment, of caring in the moment. Those soft skills are the things that will drive a healthier future, bar none. So how do I do that? How do I infuse that as where I'm up at night? And then how do I leverage AI machine learning into the technical ecosystem so it's fair, it's intuitive, and it gets to the right outcomes? I want to chase the right rabbit, the right metric. And so I'm thinking and learning on that.
And we'll come back to the agile leader piece, but one thing that I was really excited to talk about was your personal scorecard and how you're advising leaders to build their personal scorecard. So as Stephen knows, one of the things that I've implemented in my life over the last 12 months is this tracking system where I'm probably tracking too many things, but I'm tracking things like my sleep, my exercise, my diet, my anxiety levels, how productive I'm being, my personal goals, my professional goals. I track it all, like even like water intake. But for me, this is all in an effort to maintain a healthy balance in my life, because I know that if I'm doing all of these things, like I'm meditating or I'm exercising, I know that when I do these things that I'm generally happier, because that's ultimately the outcome I'm looking for. Like I want to be productive and I want to be happy. So uh I was just curious, like for you, like tell us more about this personal scorecard and why you started even building one for yourself.
I think it started because I was dyslexic and I am introverted, or I am dyslexic, not was. I've always been a bit quirky, always a bit different. And when I wanted to become a leader of others, I realized people follow humans, not just the title. Like you can command control from a title base, but it's a short influence moment. Like if you want to create a legacy, it's got to be like, you trust me, you believe in the vision and how we're going to do it together. And so who you worked with and for really matters to me. And I wanted to be authentically me. And I didn't want others' perceptions of me defocus where I wanted to become. Like I want my best version. And I was always the hardest grader in who I wanted to be. And so when I felt lost, I went back to my own personal scorecard. Like how do I look at my mirror? How do I look at myself every day? What am I grateful for? Where did I grow? Where did I not grow? And if I'm struggling with disappointment in somebody else, I have to reflect on what's my own scorecard. Just because someone else doesn't show up well doesn't mean I shouldn't do my best version. And so I started thinking about that a lot. And then I realized that a lot of leaders were looking up or being developed, looking up to their managers and copying bad behaviors. I'm like, just because they're successful because they're a jerk doesn't mean you need to be a jerk to be successful. What's your own path forward and your healthiest path forward? So scorecards, thinking along those lines. And every time I talk to somebody about their purpose, their values, I started introducing a framework I call the Goldilocks Spreadsheet, because you go through life and you learn about yourself. Like I'm much wiser today than I was a week ago even. So knowing oneself is super important. Knowing your best version and how you want to grow up to be that person is what I'm pursuing, right? And so I have my values and I have my expectations, what kind of mom I want to be, and spouse and sister and daughter. And I lost my dad this year. And when he was in hospice, I had my own scorecard. I wanted to show up a certain way, regardless of my job, regardless of my family. I'm like, this is a lifetime choice. Like, I want to look back in this time and say, did I do what I thought was right for me and my dad? And so that became my scorecard. And I did whatever I could to achieve that goal. And I think it's super important, because if you have clarity in who you are and who you espouse to be, your decision-making is so much easier, by the way. Like, I'm not going to take that meeting. I'm going to spend time with my daughters, right? Stephen, you're not going to take that call because it's your dinner, and every dinner you're going to put down your device and be there in person. For me, it was certain things with my kids. I had a bat phone analogy when they were younger. And the bat phone analogy for my scorecard was, if my kids called me back to back, whatever I was doing, I would pick up that second call. Because I worked, my husband stayed at home, I would pick up that call. And the first time they really used it, I was first time CHRO, day 4 at Align Technology, at a board meeting, presenting compensation data to the
oh my gosh.
And I had just been told I made a mistake on the deck. So I transposed the CEO's bonus. I reduced it because, remember, I'm dyslexic. So I transposed the numbers. I reduced his bonus by $50K. And my CFO had to raise his hand. He goes, Pat, I see Tom's bonus changed. And I looked at him, I'm like, damn it. And I realized that I didn't cut and paste. Normally I cut and paste the spreadsheet because I know those numbers are right. I instead manually entered into a PowerPoint and screwed it up. So now I'm like, all these things happening at once, and the phone rings, Stephen, right when that starts happening. And I'm like, please God, don't call me again. So
oh no,
it's happening. Again. It's happening. And I'm like sweating. And I remember my scorecard. And so I answered the phone they were all like, so I answered the phone so my son could hear me. And I said, excuse me, I have to take a 5-minute break. I know this is awkward, but I have a commitment to my family. We call it a bad phone. If it's back to back, it must be emergency. I'll be right back as soon as I understand what's going on. Hopefully he's dying. It's a legit call. If not, I'll be back sooner. So they all kind of like, And my son was just crying on the other end of the phone. Like he was bawling. He went to a new school. He had no friends, talked about belonging, didn't make the basketball team. He didn't know how to reach his dad. He was lonely. It was middle school, awkward, right? Like all the bad things. And he was devastated. And so I told him, like, your dad's on his way. He just texted me. You're good. You know, you can do a club team. We got you. Whatever meal you want tonight, your pizza, whatever is yours. And so he calmed down. I came back in the room and I had to give him context. I said, here's what happened to my son. So thank you for giving me the time to talk to him, because it's part of my commitment, my scorecard to my family. And one of the board members goes, hey, if he likes basketball so much, I'll take him to a Warriors game. I'm like, that's so sweet of you. And I kind of discounted it. And this guy elbows me and goes, he owns the Warriors.
Oh,
What?
that is sick.
And then the guy goes to me on the other side, board member goes, I just want to commend you, because if you have a scorecard like that, and if we're on your scorecard, I know you'll make the right decisions, the right values. I see how you lead yourself.
I love that. And I'm trying to envision this scorecard that you're looking at. But like for me, one of the tabs in my spreadsheet is like, it's like categorized as like a happy face, right? And I'm tracking things like how stressed was I that day? What were my anxiety levels like? But one thing that I added to that tab was acts of kindness, because I felt like if I'm being kind every day to the people that I interact with, then everything else will sort of follow. And to your point, it helps, and I'm not perfect, but it helps inform how I show up, even if I'm having like a terrible day. So I'm curious, for your Goldilocks spreadsheet, are there numbers that you're tracking, or is it more so like guiding principles?
There's a couple of things. So the Goldilocks spreadsheet and the scorecard kind of overlap a little bit, but the Goldilocks is like, how do I want to grow up in my career and what matters to me personally in that pursuit? Because a lot of times you just get led in your career, you don't lead your career. And I find that's people are miserable when that happens over time. They don't know how they ended up in that job. They look back and go, how did I end up in finance? I had no idea. So if you think about a simple spreadsheet, y'all, it's like column one are our values, and they sharpen as we age. What we think that we will walk away a job for really isn't such a bad thing, and we tolerate it. But there's a few things that really matter to us in the culture and the care in that company or in that experience that we will walk away from. Be clear on that. The second one are our motivators, and they change on a dime. So, you know, Stephen, picking on you one more time, if your daughter was sick, you wouldn't travel. Your motivator is not to travel for 6 months while she gets treatment of X, Y, or Z physical therapy. You're just going to be hunkering down. That's your motivator. Be there for her, right? And so think about your motivators change quite a bit, and being aware of that and knowing when you have to verbalize those things, because sometimes you're going to have to in order to be supported by others. Then you're going to have a column of superpowers, things that you love to do and things you necessarily have to do, and you're good at it, but you got to know how to do it in order to get to your end goal. Your body, your physical reaction to things you love doing, you change chemically in your body, you feel better. So if I get to play with butterflies all day, I'm like, cool. If I have to play with snails, not so great. So knowing that, where you get your joy, because if you're stuck in a role that makes you do things that are necessary, evil kind of stuff, I'm not saying they're evil for bad, but just like hard stuff for you, don't spend your day doing that. You'll drain your energy. Everyone does their best when they get to learn, and they have some choice in how they learn what they learn. And so do a column of learning, things that get me joy, things I think are necessary skills to build so I can be my best self. And then you kind of map out where you are today in your job. How are you meeting those motivators and those values and the learning and the joy? How much time am I spending in those buckets? And if I could craft my ideal role, what would that look like? And just visualize it. And then compare to where you're living today, and how do I manifest that? And that's what you chase, is that manifestation of that outcome. I visualized my first CHRO job. I had a coach that spent time with me and 5 other women. And I've visualized putting a personal painting on the wall, right? Showing my artistic creative side, showing pictures of my kids. They know I'm a mom, that they smiled when they saw me because I want to be liked as well as respected. And I kind of walked through in my head the whole thing. And I had pink hair and I had my high tops and I had a nice dress on. So I was professional, but had a little bit of funk to it. And so we get up from this visualization and she goes, "Why aren't you doing that today?" And I'm like, "I should." So I started dyeing my hair pink and purple, wearing my sneakers, started painting. And my first
Yes.
out of line had this, I made this painting from my wall and I've been rocking me ever since. Like, why not live that way now? So part of my scorecard is being authentic in my joy and me.
I love everything from I love how you walked us through how this scorecard initially like became a thing and how it's evolved over the years. And one thing that I read, I think it was from an article you wrote a few years back, but you said, "My purpose is to help build high performing, healthy companies that can scale. My joy in life is caring for people, my family, friends, my employees, their families, and communities. My guiding principle is to treat people beautifully." So much like your Goldilocks spreadsheet and your scorecard have evolved, I'm curious, has this purpose statement evolved over the last 3 years, or is it largely the same?
Largely the same. I wrote a purpose statement on the whiteboard one year when I was asked, "What do you stand for?" And I take these things seriously, apparently. So at like 8 o'clock at night, I'm writing it down. And I just want to make the world better for having been here. I want, when you and I spend time together, you feel like it was valuable time. You're better off for having engaged with me. I want to be kind and I want to give more than I get. I'm very lucky in my life, right? And I've had hard times, but I want to give more than I get. And what I don't do is chase the day. What I've learned with wisdom is that it is a reflection of a week or a month. How did I live that time? Because there's not a perfect day that you can replicate every day. It's just, and I get more disappointed. It's like my pediatrician told me, if your kids get a veggie in a week, some protein in a week, they get their milk, they're going to live, right? So I'm going to be more kind to myself on some of these things and reflect, am I directionally in the right place? But yeah, I'm pretty true to who I am right now. And I'm happy.
And that's, as somebody who has like a scorecard of sorts, that's the one thing I've learned over the last 12 months. It's easy to beat myself up when I'm not perfect. And it's something that me and Steven have talked about a lot in the past couple of months. Like, it's impossible to have a perfect day, a perfect week, a perfect month, a perfect year, a perfect life. So I'm working on being a little bit more kind to myself.
Please do. It's meant to give you a compass of the journey, not to realize it perfectly every day, because the burden for me to be perfect every day, I would beat myself up. Like, I'm the harsh critic. So being more kind, you'll have more energy the next day.
And I think kindness is key. Kindness to others, kindness to yourself. It's just one of the, and as embarrassing as it feels, like I didn't find self-kindness, self-compassion until like the last 5 years. I understood what the concept was. I just didn't know how you do that. And for me, I always thought the pursuit of my goals and my dreams and my capital S self was like, there has to be a formula. It just seems so intuitive to everyone else. Like, everyone is like out there doing their thing, adulting, meeting their goals, getting the car, like doing, and it's like, but for me, it just doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel intuitive. So I spent the vast majority of my career searching for a formula. Like, maybe if I get close enough to a leader, or I grow my personal network, or I take this training or this operating system, that will be the key. And I now can, looking back, I can see that the key is inside of me, and it's a discovery, and there is no external thing or metric, or like, I have to find it. It's going to be a journey, and it's going to be scary, and there will be ups and downs. But once I like truly understood that, that's when I could start being a little more self-compassionate and being more gentle with myself. And man, it truly has like opened up a whole new realm of pursuit of the things that I want to do and the person that I want to be.
That's awesome. I mean, that is super awesome. I know that working on myself and thinking through my values, my scorecard, how I intend to show up, I don't always get it right. Like I reflect back, I'm like, I was kind of short there. I wasn't as appreciative there. And so I've learned to ask for feedback frequently, right? Just like polishing an apple. I know you love me, or I know we're friends, but like if you make me a better apple, what would that look like to you? Like start, stop, continue, like make me a better version of me. What wisdom? Just give me one thing so I don't feel overwhelmed. And you ask like that, and people are like, lean in and make you successful with you. Like it just widens the network of people catching me when I fall down, because I do fall down. I made some amazing mistakes in my career, and I've had amazing human beings that help me. It's how you pick yourself up.
And amazing successes. Like we talked about your journey, and you know there are truly remarkable things there, and I think it's important to celebrate that. Also, it's hard. Like I don't always see those things, but and the next topic, you know, is another aspect of my life that has been a journey for me, and that's the topic of leadership. And earlier you mentioned, you know, this necessity for leaders to be more agile and kind of bucking the old mold of the transformational leader, or whatever type of leadership or business jargon buzzword that we've historically operated from. And so I read your post on the Agile Leader, and what is it about the Agile Leader that you feel is more appropriate for the modern organization than the transformational leader?
The world has shifted, and we got to shift with it, and shifting faster and faster and faster. And there's more burden on organizations to bridge the gap in society to help people find the care and support they need outside the virtual business walls. So you're going to talk about politics, you're going to talk about sexuality, you're going to talk about religion, you're going to talk about a whole bunch of things, right? So from a leader perspective, if you Googled leadership a decade ago, you'd get innovator, you'd get a visionary, right? But now it's servant leader, it's communicator, it's listener, it's caring, right? It's curiosity. It's the person that actually helps bring the human along in the journey and drives them towards success, right? They're the connector of others, and they're inclusive, right? And if you think about the landscape, just the identity has shifted, right? It's no longer just male and female, just the languages we use. So when you think about what it takes to lead others and how we identify, how we show up in our needs, right? And the pressures we have, my sense of belonging is a thumbprint. It's unique to me. I think about old school situational leadership training, right? It's not one size fits all. And so I think we have to go back, and like any great strategy, it falls apart when it hits the ground. As soon as you start implementing something, you're like, shoot, I didn't think about this piece, or I didn't realize they were that far behind. And so these variables inevitably come into play. And so an agile leader stays calm in that moment because they expect change. They expect that we're going to learn along the way. We're going to adjust the path up the mountain. The mountain stays the same. It's the right way to go. We need to achieve X, but maybe instead of jumping over the boulder, we'll just walk around it. It's probably safer for us, or we'll break these rocks apart, or we'll lift up this thing differently. And you bring more people on the journey with you, so it's sustainable, right? Like a large change that you want to create legacy capability so it lives beyond you and me means that you need many hearts and minds attached to it. And you got to be agile to listen to people to get it through.
I agree with everything. You're speaking my language. I love everything that you're saying. And in fact, there's one in the article, you list 10 like traits or attributes, I think, of an agile leader. And one of them just hit me, just really struck me. And that is, an agile leader must be more vulnerable and honest than everyone else. If they give permission to push back and have the courage to continually course correct, they will make and uncover more roadblocks than the transformational leader on their singular path. The agile leader knows there are no mistakes, only learning opportunities by continually testing the hypothesis and co-creating across the organization. Everyone will learn faster and reach greater heights. That just gets it right there for me. And I think,
I got goose chills. I so believe in that.
I do too. I
got goose chills.
and the part, and I think if you've ever been in the struggle, like the opposite, right, of an agile leader or being vulnerable and honest is being controlled with information and being closed off. And you immediately, I think if you spent any material time in the workplace, you know that type of leader. You've seen it, you've worked with them or maybe for them. And it's a horrible experience, at least for me. But to find the trust in myself to be vulnerable, like I can be vulnerable and it will be okay, was extremely hard. And I ultimately realized that if I'm going to accomplish the things that I need to accomplish, I can't do it on my own. To have other people. And as a CEO, that is one of the hardest things to come to terms with. Every problem or issue is yours, and most of the successes are not, right? That's for everyone else. And so as a high achievement person, I always struggle with that. But when I did find that place of being vulnerable and being honest, everything started changing for me. It became easier for me to let go. So it was like the more vulnerable, the more honest, the more I could let go. The more I let go, the more my team members would enroll themselves in solving the toughest problems we had. And it just is counterintuitive. Maybe I'm on my own here, but it was just so counterintuitive to me. But in practice, absolutely transformational for me as a leader. And I still have work to do. Like, I know there still is that impulse of like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be honest and vulnerable. Excuse me, in this situation. But in my scorecard, one of my affirmations that I write down every day is I choose peace, love, compassion, and tolerance. And for me, that is like the prompt to remind myself that if I choose this way of being, it's going to give me the capacity to be vulnerable and more honest. And so I just wanted to call that out and just share my experience with it, because I love this concept of the agile leader. And, in my experience, that willingness to be vulnerable and honest, it's powerful, like I just said, and it has the power to enroll others. And so similar to that, what are some of the other key behaviors, capabilities of an agile leader that stick out to you, in addition to the vulnerability and the honesty?
They ask more questions than make statements. They try to listen to the quieter voices, the voices that are not in the room, even to make sure it's inclusive. They're intentional with bringing in the DNA of the different ideas together as one team, so people can see themselves in that outcome. Mistakes are shared for the great learning that you have, so others don't hit the plexiglass wall. Guess what I got to learn today? Like the energy of the learning of the mistake. Because if you do that, you unlock potential and you create just this amazing human element. So those things I care about. And as soon as you show vulnerability in an authentic way, more hands lift you up than you can ever imagine. And you won't feel alone. It's a great belonging moment, and you can give it to others. So when someone comes forward and says, hey, this kind of messed up, you go, what did we learn today? That's so exciting. Like, what can we do now? Like, how awesome that we figured that out now. Can you imagine if it was 2 years from now, we had all these problems later? Oh, thank you for finding it. Like, you turn it into a blessing, not a curse.
I love that. And my last question, because you've worked with some amazing leaders, like truly innovative leaders. And so of these skills or traits of the agile leader, is there any one that you find most challenging for the leaders that you've worked with? Or, if there's like any observations you've made there in terms of like, what are the hardest aspects of being the agile leader?
I think being transparent on what you know and what you don't know. So you have a hypothesis. I've actually put on my front page of presentations of the board and C-suite, this is a proposal based on wisdom, experience, and some data. And
love it.
You got to take a faith leap sometimes. And most people are insecure, won't take that faithful leap, right? They won't. They will be too convicted on a few data points and not allow different points of view to expand their horizon line. And so if I can walk into a room and pull them into my storyline as humans and modify even my approach, even if my approach could work, that's not the point. The point is I really want Daniel and you to come with me. And so then if you tweak it a little bit, I can still climb the same mountain. What if it's a better mountain path? What if it has like springs of water and leaves and flowers along the path? I'm going to take that one with y'all, right? Versus my rocky one alone. That has magic to it. And if you do that as an organization, if you create a lot more agile leaders, you'll achieve your outcomes better, faster, and there'll be a legacy, right? They will live beyond you because people have learned.
I feel like that's the the perfect segue into rapid fire questions. So every episode ends the exact same way. We have rapid fire questions, and it's the same set of 3 questions. And the first question is, how do you define a modern people leader? What are the traits and characteristics?
I lead with care, compassion, transparency, and inclusion.
Next question. If you could go back in time and talk to a 22-year-old you, what career advice would you give yourself and why?
Embrace your authenticity sooner. You'll be happier.
I might add like a bonus question to that that's slightly related to that one. You've walked us through how you like to visualize the goal. And for you, the goal was always chief people officer. You have this vision. You have this goal. Like, what would you say, what has helped you the most in achieving that goal?
My values. I'm always there for the employee to make it right, to create a high-performing, healthy company that scales. So if you have the right intent with the work ethic and you co-create, then magic happens. I'm here not because I'm great at what I do. I'm here because I was fortunate enough to work with amazing human beings that gave me the freedom, the courage, the support, and I was wise enough to listen.
Love that. All right, last rapid fire question. Is there anything that you believe to be true about the world of work, but don't yet have the data to support?
The thing I laugh about is that we talk about being global organizations. We're very nationally oriented. Anywhere you live, any country, they want us to be global. What they're saying is they want you to understand their uniqueness, be it in India, Morocco, Bulgaria, Uruguay, Texas. It's just what people are saying, just see me my unique way. And so I think when we say we're a global company, I think what we should say is that we see everybody in their unique way and needs, and we create a unified vision for them.
So Daniel and I are truly blessed. The fact that we get to do this every week, talk to amazing people like you, it's just like we far exceeded our original goals and our original vision for what the modern people leader would become. And a big reason, as Daniel mentioned, we included the next question going back to the early episodes, and you were in fact one of the responses to my next question. And so if there's 1 or 2 people that are just truly pushing the people function, or they're doing remarkable things in the space of human resources, who are those individuals? Like, who would you pick? And again, if we could have them on the show, like, we don't even have to go there, but we're just curious, like, who are the people that really need to be heard in our space?
Gosh, I have so many amazing folks in my network that I lean on and ask questions. I would love to sit in your chair if you interview Christine Deputy. She's the CHRO at Pinterest right now. She ran HR for Nordstrom, so privately family owned, going through COVID, a lot of lessons learned and things that she's done to take care of her employees, was at Starbucks. And she's just a great human.
Love it. Well, we would be honored. And of course, we'll reach out to Christine and see if she's interested, but sounds like she is doing some great work. And so that gets us to the last tradition on the Modern People Leader. We call it one word or phrase close. We all respond with a word or few. Just as we reflect on this amazing hour plus that we've spent together, just a way of wrapping things up.
Energized.
Yes.
Purpose.
Daniel? Purpose. I'm going to go with goosebumps. I haven't
Ooh, I like
gotten
that one.
goosebumps in a lot of these conversations, and I got them. And that just goes to show that, like, these are real conversations, guys, that yes, we have an outline, and yes, we have traditions, but more often than not, Daniel and I are trying to find ways of really connecting with our guests. And thank you so much, Pat, for being open to this conversation, being open to us changing things up a little bit as we meandered through our discussion. But it's been an absolute blast. It was worth the 3-year wait.
I felt blessed. Thank you so much for having me. You made me feel good, challenged my thinking. I got a little crystallized in my head on a couple of points myself. So I am better off by having spent this time with y'all. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We wanna know what you think about the show. And you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. So thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.